Siddhikanti, the founder of the Frisco Pollen Free Initiative, and today I am joined with Hannah Jaffee, a research manager at the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. The Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America is the leading patient organization for people with asthma and allergies and the oldest asthma and allergy patient group in the world. Now, Hannah is here to discuss with us some brief information regarding pollen allergies and how we can take steps to try to mitigate these in our area. So, before we get started, Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience and give them a brief overview on how exactly pollen allergies work?
Sure. So I'm Hannah Jaffee. I'm the research manager at the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. So we conduct research throughout the year, including landscape reports such as our Asthma and Allergy Capitals report, as well as patient insights research into what it's like to live with asthma and allergies. Pollen allergies affect many people. There are over 100 million people in the US with some sort of allergic condition, whether that be asthma or allergies. So we really help to serve them. They're super common, and tree pollen and pollen allergy is a main cause of allergic
Mhm.
conditions. It's a main trigger. And really, as most people know, it happens seasonally. Tree pollen is generally it peaks in the spring, but can really happen at any point throughout the year. And trigger some of those allergic reactions. So things like runny nose, sniffing, watery
Mhm.
eyes, itchy eyes, things like that. Um, can be mild to miserable. So we're here to help. You know, people manage those allergies.
Absolutely. And I could be wrong, correct me if I am, but I believe that allergies have been getting worse and more common in recent years. Why is that? And why are they specifically getting worse in urban slash suburban areas like Frisco?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the biggest reason that we can pinpoint is climate change. So all of the outputs of climate change, so things like rising temperatures and increased carbon dioxide, those all contribute to longer growing seasons. So plants start producing pollen earlier and stop producing pollen later, which really just extends that pollen season. And they produce more pollen as well. So from the 90s to today, pollen seasons have actually started about 20 days earlier and last
Wow.
10 days longer.
Wow.
So it's something that's been studied and that we know, and that's all sort of been attributed to climate change.
Wow. So I know you talked about the growing seasons. How do the growing seasons differ between male plants and female plants?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really I'm not really sure exactly
Mhm.
how they might differ. Um, I think I would have to look a little more into that.
Okay. Well, going down further that road, trying to broaden it, what are the difference in terms of implications when it comes to planting male versus female plants?
Yeah, so a lot of trees that are planted in cities do have sort of both male and female parts or flowers. But that being said, trees that are specifically female, those are going to be more of the seed or fruit-bearing trees,
Hmm.
which is why historically in the 40s and 50s, city planners kind of preferred to not plant those types of trees just because
Hmm.
they bear fruit, the fruit drops, it makes a mess on the streets, it's harder to clean up. Whereas the more like male trees are going to be the wind pollinating, which is why you will see more of those trees planted in cities. Um, so those are sort of like the main differences between the two.
Hmm. Now, would you say that originally when the city planners were picking to go with the male plants over the female plants, and they took in those seeds and fruits into consideration, was that particularly to save costs, or was there something else behind that?
It's hard to say, but I would guess so. It's probably co it costs more money to go in and clean up after the
Yeah,
fruits that fall down. Whereas with more wind pollinating trees, you don't have to worry about that. So, if I were to venture a guess, I would say cost and then also aesthetic reasons.
yeah.
Just looks prettier.
Okay. So since pollen allergies are getting so much more common and worse, what are the long-term implications for people that have these allergies?
Yeah, I think first, and we hear this anecdotally, we see people who have not historically had allergies start having allergies. So you've got a lot of people who are sort of newly diagnosed and new to managing the condition. And then in addition to that, people who have had allergies in the past, it might become harder for them to manage their allergies. So if you're used to, taking an over-the-counter antihistamine to manage your allergies, it might be harder to manage that over time just because the pollen load is so much higher, over decades. So I think overall it's harder for people to manage their allergies, and it also sort of just requires a little more innovation in
Yeah.
managing those allergies.
Absolutely. So, me personally, I'm someone who has pretty severe pollen allergies, and I've had it since, when I was a little kid. So, with that being said, are there any health implications for me as time goes on, as I'm trying to deal with these severe pollen allergies?
Yeah, so a lot of people have what's called allergic asthma, where their asthma is triggered by their allergies. So, that comes hand in hand with when allergies get worse. That can also lead to more asthma exacerbations, lead to more emergency room visits, hospitalizations for asthma. So those are some pretty significant health effects. And then just in general, it impacts things like quality of life and mental health as well. If,
Mhm.
you feel like you can't live your life to the fullest because you're
Yeah.
managing your allergies. Um, so I think those are pretty the big impacts that would come with that.
Okay. So, with all this coming into play and so many people dealing with allergies, what would you recommend to try to make a change in the environment today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think trees are really effective at regulating climate change or
Mhm.
regulating the climate. So, I don't want the message to be like, let's stop planting trees because
Yeah.
trees play a really important role. But I think more so like diversifying the types of trees that we plant in parks, cities, urban areas can really help reduce the burden of pollen and allergies in an area. And then beyond diversifying the trees, I think um, initiatives and policies that address climate change, so strengthening clean air policies, focusing on like renewable energy sources, things that really address climate change that make pollen seasons worse are really important to take into consideration when looking at the impact of allergies as they are today and also for the
Mhm.
future.
Okay. So I know you quickly touched on trying to advocate for policies. Is there anything that a community can come together as a whole to try to fight for? I know botanical sexism is obviously a pretty big problem. And here at the Frisco Pond Free Initiative, we're looking to shift from male plants to female plants. Is that the right approach, or is there something that we're missing?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. So there's a project from Claritin called Diversity,
Mhm.
and they're aiming to do exactly that. So they have tree planting initiatives throughout the country to focus more on planting these female trees, specifically where kids play, go to school. So they have tree planting initiatives in schools, parks, and playgrounds, and they've actually used our allergy capitals report to identify places to plant these trees. Um, And I think those also go sort of hand in hand with those more
Yeah.
climate change initiatives as well. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities out there for you to engage in.
Okay, so this might be a step back, but you did mention targeting places where children spend a lot of time. Are pollen allergies something that's genetic or something that's developed with a lot of exposure?
So there's a little bit of both. So there is sort of a genetic component. We do see usually in families, multiple people have asthma or allergic conditions, but it is also environmental. So, the more that you're exposed to a certain allergy or allergen, the more likely that you might eventually become allergic to it. So there's definitely both.
Okay. Now, would there be some sort of message that you would send to the general public or policymakers when it comes to the importance of taking action against allergies?
Yeah. I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's just allergies. Um, but it's not. Allergies can
Mhm.
really impact people's quality of life. It can impact their health. So I think it's really important to really prioritize these efforts when we talk about community health and public health. So I think making concerted efforts to address things like climate change and address these factors that we know can either make better or worse allergies for people living with them, I think is really important.
All right. Well, Hannah, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us here today. I think the audience learned a lot from your expertise and knowledge in this field. And yeah, thank you.
Of course, thank you so much.